Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local.
But now let's move on to you, David. And Miriam Ellis wrote a really nice piece about local food delivery, and you wanted to talk about that.
Yeah, this is a fantastic interview with Clay Seaman of, I think it's called Eat LoCo, which is the Omaha. It's actually legitimately is a co-op of local Omaha restaurants who have teamed up to build their own delivery service, their own version of DoorDash or Grubhub or Caviar, name the brand. And it was just a very interesting. It was a great interview. It was a really interesting sort of blow by blow of how the service came together. They looked at sort of Midwestern neighbor in Iowa City to use as a model for how they built this concept. I think they got 40 restaurants to buy in for $2,500 a piece to kind of get the thing off the ground, and then I believe Clay said there are actually no dues, which is sort of a historic model of farmers co-ops in Nebraska, which I think is kind of neat. Some really interesting data points around how they're going to market. He said that the restaurants themselves pushing this in signage and in social media and anywhere they can to get their customers to use Eat LoCo is kind of their number one means of acquiring new customers. They do have, it's an ongoing problem, I think, just like it is for any business right now, to hire at the sort of lower end of the wage spectrum. So they're sort of putting out, driver ads everywhere they can. It's kind of a classic, sort of marketplace problem of like, how do you balance the consumer demand with your deliveries, with your service providers? But I just thought it was a really, really interesting interview. It's certainly, it gives me hope anyway that there is a sort of small tech counterpoint to some of these more predatory larger services. It also, to sort of segue back to, I think it was last week's Near Memo, it might have been 2 weeks ago. There is the problem of Google only working with players at scale, and the default links for order online on a GMB profile point to DoorDash and Grubhub and whatever the major players are. So it really, these guys are definitely up against a little bit of a competitive wall, but one hopes that, if there's one of these in Iowa City and Omaha, and maybe this can spread to Austin and Portland and San Diego, and maybe there's enough scale with these sort of smaller providers that Google is sort of forced to open up a program to bring in their services into GMB. So I just thought it was a really inspiring interview. Seems like a really well-run organization, and kudos to Miriam for doing such a great job of writing it.
There was a reference in the article to leveraging the technology that Iowa City used with the hope that they could roll it out nationally so that they could use a single platform, despite the co-op nature of the ownership on a per city basis, where you, as somebody from Portland traveling to Rapid City, wherever, Omaha, could then use it or use it in Portland as well. So I think their ambitions are national, but the impediment that Google puts in place because of their need for scale, would prevent them from becoming a choice. I mean, you can list them in your GMB as the link, but it doesn't get highlighted the way the others.
But it's not the blue order online button.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, this also tests this sort of, affinity to buy local, to shop small that everybody says in surveys that they have, right? So there's this sort of tension between that heartfelt desire to support local business and what's right for the community, and the sort of default mode, the Amazon impulse, which is to just go with what's easy, what the well-worn path that's, path of least resistance. And I think, these guys really, having the local restaurants promote this is really a critical for them. But they have to somehow build a local brand that people know. They can't rely on SEO, or they can't rely on being found. They have to affirmatively build a brand, I think, that everybody knows about.
Right. They
And
did
those two.
They also had the lucky, or I think it was lucky, that they got some PPP money to deliver food to the
Right.
under the government to people that were in need. Sort of got them going, so it gave them a little bit extra money to build out their app. So now that they're really rolling, it'll be interesting to stay in touch with them and see how it works out over the next couple of years, and whether it can achieve any scale across the United States. If they could be in the top 50 markets,
I mean, this
would be a real win.
This is part of a larger problem, not just with food delivery. About supporting local business in an ethical way with technology, doing things that people have become accustomed to doing online. Whether it's shopping. I mean, I'm blanking on the name that the April Underwood's company that's trying to sort of e-commerce enable local business. There's a lot of these kinds of initiatives in pockets, but the fundamental challenge is just the gravitational power of these giant brands and the lack of access to capital. Is a big. These are major obstacles for these companies, but it's hopefully there'll be some successes, because I think this is really what we need to counteract these enormous. The consolidation of power in these giant companies.
Well, part of it, too, is the erasure of history from our memories. It's like we don't remember what a Nebraska farm co-op ran like. I experienced them when I joined my father in business in the early 80s, but that was the last of them. They've gone by the wayside. And it's an unfortunate sort of trend in society that I think speaks to every level of education and knowledge, as well as attitude and behaviors.
Well, these co-ops are not going to get the kind of VC investor investment. There's no 10x return here,
Right.
So,
absolutely. And there's massive amounts of money in the VC and PE world. These are alternative banking systems with more capital than they absolutely know what to do with.
Yep. So
we tried to end on a hopeful note, but
the fact that this business exists and that they seem to be making a go of it,
and they have a good model,
is helpful.
And that they have a good model, leveraging the restaurants to do the marketing. Right. I think that's great.
And that it's replicable, right? And they can be supportive of one another because they represent certain defined geographic markets, and they're not competing with one another. Right. So that's all hopeful.
Absolutely.
All right. There you go.
Thanks for listening to another Near Memo, and we'll see you next week for episode 30.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.